This is our special Valentine's Day and Super Bowl Sunday meeting. Very warm, which I guess okay, for us anyway. And
Maria, you're muted. Okay.
yeah, I don't know why Scott did that. I don't think he wanted to hear.
I was trying to mute someone and they muted themselves and disappeared right when I was hitting the button and it went to you instead.
Okay.
I apologize.
It's all right. I saw you did it. It's okay. So we will go into some business of the show and sale, some more business of the show and sale at the end of the meeting. So please stick around. And I will let MA introduce our speaker for today.
Hi, everybody. Happy Valentine's weekend. I'm glad so many people found time for us before the Super Bowl. And I'm really excited to get to introduce you to one of the new rising stars in the cactus and succulent world, Jackson Burkholder. I first saw him at the convention up in, where was it? Up Central Coast a couple years ago, I guess 3 years ago. And Jackson, born and raised in Colorado, he grew up in a cactus family. He grew up in the Cactus and Succulent Club there. He's been show chair, vice president, show chair again. He's been a judge for 6 years, and he's now one of the newer members on the board of directors of the Cactus and Succulent Society of America. He has a degree in horticulture and a minor in botany and Japanese. He's interested in restoring ancient equipment and using it in his research. He's finishing his master's in anatomy on cactus extrafloral nectarines, whatever that means. So
He's done a talk on that, and that's really interesting.
So I'm really looking forward to learning about a new country and the plants there. So welcome, Jackson. I'm so glad you could join us. And at this moment, you're muted. Now you're not. Well done.
So I just want to interrupt. Please, everyone, mute yourselves and feel free to unmute yourselves if you want to ask a question. Jackson, do you want to take questions afterwards or during? What's your preference?
Either way. Sometimes it's hard to see when they pop up over the course of the presentation. So you can ask them, and if I see them, I'll try to answer them then.
Okay, if it's in the chat and I see that it's kind of relevant to something you're talking about, I'll interrupt if that's okay.
Yep, that'd be perfect.
Cool. Well, you know, I met Jackson when he was a high school student at attending the convention in
San Luis Obispo.
No, I met him at the Tucson convention when he was just a high school student. And we all knew that Jackson was going to be part of our organization way back then. So it's so good to see you all grown up and doing so well. So I will let you share your screen and start your presentation.
Cool. All right, I think, let me make sure. Can everybody see?
I see it, yes.
Cool, perfect.
Yep, you're fine.
Cool. Thanks for the introduction, and happy Valentine's Day to everybody. Today, I guess it's appropriate for Valentine's Day looking at pretty flowers or bouquets of flowers. So there's going to be a lot of that in this talk. So we'll get started. Today, I'm going to be talking about the genus Sulcorebutia, which is probably my favorite genus of cacti. It's probably the one, well, definitely the one that I grow the most of. And so we'll get a chance to look at some of the flowers and look into this genus in a little bit more depth over the course of this presentation. So first off, just an introduction, looking at what the scientific name Sulcorebutia means. Sulcus is the Latin word for furrow, And this refers to the shape of the areoles. And we'll look at a couple of pictures, exactly how this describes a unique feature of the areoles. And then second of all, Rebutia is the second part of the scientific name. Probably as most of you are familiar with, the genus Rebutia, that's a small genus of small cespitose or clustering alpine cacti, named for a French nurseryman, Pierre Rebute. And over the course of this presentation, we're going to start with a quick description. Like I said, what makes a Sulcorebutia, talk a little bit about their taxonomy, then their distribution, where they grow. They have a very restricted range, actually. Next, we'll talk about their culture, some of the books that you can, some of the books and programs actually you can use to learn more about these plants. And then finally, we'll have what I'm going to call a virtual tour through Bolivia. I've never been to Bolivia. I would definitely like to go. But basically looking at the plants from my collection in an order that reflects kind of a trip through the Bolivian highlands where these plants are native to. So first off, before I introduce or describe Sulcorebutia, introduce a little bit of cacti morphological terminology here, starting off with the areole. Most people are probably familiar, at least with the word areole, that it's the point where the spines come out of the cactus. The technical definition is that it is a pad-like short shoot with leaves modified into spines from which branches and flowering shoots form. It includes both the modified leaves, the spines, and there's a little meristem or growing point kind of on the upper edge of the structure. Then next, the areole is on top of a tubercle. This is a protrusion from the cactus body that is topped with areoles. We look at the morphology of the tubercle. It originates from an enlarged leaf base. So this is actually leaf tissue here that the axillary bud, the growing point here, is perched atop. And then lastly, the spines. This is a sharp pointed structure, like it says, resulting from modified leaf tissue. It's different from things like thorns and prickles, which result from other plant tissues. A spine, by definition, has to be a modified leaf. So with that in mind, to look at a closer, kind of a close-up drawing here of a Sulcorebutia areole, you can see that we have a furrow that starts at the top of the tubercle and goes down to the bottom of the areole. You can see that in this previous picture, you can see that furrow that starts at the top of the tubercle and goes down to the base of the areole. So that's where the genus Sulcorebutia gets its name. Of course, that growing point is at the upper half of the areole. Here you can see a flower bud that is coming out of that growing point. And then, of course, the rest of the areole with both central spines here, as well as a number of kind of thickened radial spines as well that are more oppressed to the plant surface. Just kind of a more general description, all the plants in this genus are small alpine cacti. They grow at high elevations in the Andes Mountains, as we'll look at in a little bit. Most are cespitose. Like I said, that means they are clustering with a lot of a pile of small little heads. And then even solitary species, or species that are usually solitary in habitat, in cultivation will start to cluster with age. In nature, smaller species will grow either near to or flush with the ground level. But there are larger species, more species that might be more solitary in habitat, that can grow taller and get quite a bit above the level of the soil. The areoles, like we looked at in detail in the last couple slides, are vertically elongated. And then the flowers form from areoles around the base or the sides of the stem versus coming from areoles at the apex. So here's an example of one of the larger species of the genus. I think this is possibly Yolante. I think it's a different one, actually. But you can see that it's growing between these two rocks. It's a larger plant. It's probably about maybe 3.5 inches across, growing well above the level of the substrate. More typical, though, especially for the cespitose or clustering species, you can see that these little heads are really just at kind of flush with the level of the soil, with the soil mixed in between them all. And so if you look at these flowers, it actually, it's hard to tell which of these many heads the flowers are associated with. And this is all one plant here, probably, that has clustered like this to form a little clump just at soil level. So now we will, sorry, transfer into the taxonomy of the genus. Which was created in the year 1951 by Kurt Backberg, with the type species being Sulcorebutia steinbachii. And this species was formerly classified as a Rebutia. Since then, the species from this genus have been included in both Rebutia, like they were before Sulcorebutia as a genus was even created, and even before 1985, which is the date of Pilbeam's book, there is a close affinity with Weingardia that was suspected. According to more recent molecular work, all the species of Sulcorebutia weingardia and the monotypic genus Cynthia basically come out together when you run the analysis of the genetics. But because the genus Weingardia was named in 1937, which is about just under 20 years before the genus Sulcorebutia was described, all the plants from Sulcorebutia had to be transferred to Weingardia. Cynthia, of course, being an even more recent genus, was also transferred to Weingardia. And it has been found out, like I said, it has been found out that Sulcorebutia can hybridize with Weingardia, but actually cannot hybridize with the genus Rebutia, confirming that Sulcorebutia and Weingardia are more closely related than either genus is to Rebutia. So in this talk, I'm going to focus on the former genus of Sulcorebutia. Like I said, just about all the plants actually all the plants in this presentation, because I do include a couple pictures of Cynthia and Weingardia, are now, if you follow the newest and best taxonomy, should be placed in the genus Weingardia. It's kind of sad because I very much like the genus Sulcorebutia, and I like the genus Cynthia as well. So there's sometimes when you look at the taxonomy or the newer taxonomy and say, oh, well, you know, it's a little shaky. I don't feel like I have to follow it because it's probably just going to change. It's probably not 100% correct. With this, combining Sulcorebutia and Cynthia into Weingardia, it's very, I would say, a lot of robust data on both morphological and phylogenetic that supports the move. So if you want to do it, definitely, if you move them into Weingardia, you probably will not have to redo your tags for quite a while. So just to look at that in a little bit more detail, here is the monotypic genus Cynthia, which is now Weingardia cynthiensis, maybe. I don't remember. I don't think it's Kunzii as the specific epithet, or Neesii, sorry. But this is what they look like. They're small, kind of lumpy plants with very short, if any, spines that have these nice yellow flowers from the apex of the plant. Next, here's an example of a member of the genus Weingardia. In case you're wondering, there is a plant under there. But when we look at Weingardias from the side here, you can see that we do have a relatively elongated areole, maybe not as accentuated as on members of Sulcorebutia, but if you compare this to something like a Mammillaria areole, it is a much more elongated. That flower, just as we saw in that drawing of a Sulcorebutia areole, is on the upper side, and we will look at kind of in the next few slides how the genus Weingardia actually kind of grades into the Sulcorebutia, or the genus Sulcorebutia. So keeping this picture in mind, we will grow from this Weingardia lantana here to a member of the genus Sulcorebutia, Sulcorebutia purpurea. And you can see that we've got an areole that's maybe a little bit more elongated, but that flower, the floral tube looks almost identical, and the flower comes from the same position. One important thing to note in the genus Weingardia that is unfortunately not illustrated in this presentation is that I believe a major difference is that Weingardia can have more than one flower per aerial. I've had Weingardias with maybe 3 at a time, and then another 3 come out maybe a few weeks later. Whereas Sulcorebutia here, you'll really only get a single flower per aerial. So to follow our progression towards Weingardia to maybe a more typical Sulcorebutia, you can see here's a picture of Sulcorebutia misquensis, and the flower comes out in a relatively similar way. And you can see that that floral tube, there's no spines, so this would be a naked floral tube. There is a little bit of a bud here that could form spines, but none are formed here. But you can see it's very similar. There's a lot of morphological characteristics that support the similarities between Weingardia and Sulcorebutia. So within the genus Sulcorebutia, the taxonomy is a lot less straightforward and a lot more confusing. There's a lot of diversity within species, which I'll refer to as interspecific variation. We'll look at that a little bit more briefly later on in the program. And there's even some plants that appear to be kind of intermediate between 2 different taxa. My kind of suspicion is that there's a lot of interspecific hybridization, or interspecific, I suppose, hybridization between 2 different species, creating kind of a hybrid swarm of a lot of species that share characteristics between them, and a lot of individual plants that are kind of intermediate but different in their own right. But lately, taxa like, if you go by the new cactus lexicon, these are referred to as Rebutias now, so that's why we have an R here. So taxa like Rebutia caniguralii and Rebutia steinbachii have kind of become catch-alls for many formally distinct species. And as far as my personal philosophy goes, I tend to label the plants with the name that they came with, unless there's a gross error that I can identify. And I do it this way, basically to keep them organized in relation to other plants in the trade. So if all the plants in the trade are most commonly seen under one name, then I can keep track if I already have that plant or not. Or if I have how many different clones or forms of that plant that I might have. So next we'll move from taxonomy into the distribution and climate of where these plants grow. This is probably a little bit more relevant information to their cultivation. Sulcorebutia as a genus is found in, like I said, a very small area relatively on the eastern slope of the Andes Mountains in southeastern Bolivia. According to the Köppen climate classification system, it is a CWB climate, which translates to a dry winter subtropical highland. So this basically means that it's relatively warm, being subtropical, maybe not as warm as a tropical climate. As highland refers to that they grow at relatively high elevations, like I mentioned. And then dry winter, meaning that the majority or the driest time, or I guess you could translate this to the majority of the moisture comes at the warmest time of the year, which is basically the opposite of that. In this habitat, temperatures will remain above freezing, but they also never really rise much above the 80s. So these are plants that kind of want a cool to moderate climate. So here's a map of South America. You can see here, right kind of to the center western side is Bolivia. And then this little kind of triangle with rounded edges is the area where every member of the genus Sulcorebutia, once again, this is not including Weingardia. This is including the members of Weingardia formerly known as Sulcorebutias, are all native to this little triangle. If we zoom in on the country of Bolivia, particularly the southern portion of it, you can see that triangle in a little more zoomed in detail. Really the 3 main cities within the Sulcorebutia habitat are Cochabamba to the north, Sucre in the middle, which has the highest concentration of Sulcorebutia diversity, probably over the range is kind of in the central portion, which I suppose makes sense. And then Tarija to the south. So all the plants that we're going to be looking at in today's presentation are going to be from this triangle. So here is a climate or some climate data from Sucre, which, like I said, is kind of the center, the epicenter of the Sulcorebutia range. You can see the red line here is temperature. There's a scale for both Celsius here and Fahrenheit. And then the blue bars are the annual rainfall. You have to keep in mind that this place in Bolivia is in the southern hemisphere, so their winter is going to fall over June and July, as opposed to our winter, obviously, which is in December and January. But you can see, like I mentioned, the time of year that's the warmest is when the majority of that moisture is going to fall. And then in the winter here, when it's relatively cool, is when they will receive, I got it mixed up, sorry. The time in the winter when it's relatively cool is when they will receive the least amount of rainfall. So for us in Colorado, this isn't a huge challenge. It might be more of a challenge for you guys in California, where you get more winter or more rainfall during the winter months when these plants are going to be dormant and not want to be as wet. So now looking at that temperature line in more detail, these are the average high and average low temperatures for each month, once again for Sucre, Bolivia. And you can see that kind of the average low here for their winter, which is in our summer, is just under 40 degrees Fahrenheit. So they never really get to freezing in habitat. They get into the 30s, as you can see, but they never really freeze. As far as the high temperatures go, in the summer months here, the high would be November, it looks like, with just under 77 degrees Fahrenheit. So these plants don't get very hot. They don't get the hot temperatures that a lot of people associate with cacti and succulent plants because these habitats are so high in elevation. So now moving on to their culture, Sulcorebutia, like I've mentioned a number of times throughout the presentation, native to high elevations in subtropical South America. This means that they need the intense sunlight that you receive at those high elevations to maintain a tight growth form for plants. Before I got a greenhouse, I found Sulcorebutia is actually quite difficult to grow because they need a lot more light than can be provided inside. Of course, you can put them outside during the summer, and I started doing that as well. But really, keeping them outside year-round is the best way to do it, either in a greenhouse here or probably in California. These plants, I would assume, would be winter hardy outside in most places in coastal California. But that's one of the reasons that they do so well in Colorado is because we're about 6,200 feet just outside of Denver towards the foothills, but we get a lot brighter light than places at lower lower elevations. And these plants being from even a higher elevation from where we live here, many of these grow close to 10,000 feet. They need all the light they can get. Sulcorebutia can tolerate warm temperatures. My greenhouse has gotten up into the hundreds during the summer. The plants don't seem too bothered by it, but if it gets real warm when the plants are flowering, the petals will start to burn on the edges and wilt, creating less pretty flowers. But they appreciate cool to moderate temps. And here, at least, when it does get that hot, they do most of their growing in spring and fall, when those temperatures are more similar to the ones that they would experience in nature. Light freezes no lower than 32 degrees Fahrenheit can be tolerated. My greenhouse has frozen, and it's actually got lower than 32, but not for long periods of time. So I suspect for short periods of time, these plants can take into the high to mid 20s as well. But despite that they don't really get this cold, cooler temperatures, maybe into the high 30s low 40s are essential for setting flower buds in the spring. I found a lot of people complain about Sulcorebutias and Rebutias to some extent not flowering in their collections. And in Colorado, that's because they keep the plants inside year round, or inside, especially in the winter, where it never really gets below 60. And that just doesn't get cold enough for the plants to realize it's winter and to set those flower buds for the following spring. Now we'll talk a little bit about the pots and media that can be used with Sulcorebutias. These plants, even though they don't get very high above the soil level, they often have huge tap roots. Even for a small head can have a tap root that maybe goes 4.5 inches down. So deep pots are essential to grow these plants well. Because of these tap roots, they can often cause plastic pots to bulge and break. I've had that happen quite frequently in my greenhouse, and as we look at some of the pictures, you'll see some of the pots maybe aren't as square as they were when they started out. But the tap roots also make these plants susceptible to rot. So to cope with that, there are kind of two main choices that you can go with when potting Sulcorebutias. The first option is what I use, and this is just a regular cactus and succulent media plus a layer of top dressing to keep water away from the crown of the plant. And you can see that's what's illustrated in this picture. This solid line represents the soil, which goes up just below the crown of the plant. And then the upper part of the taproot and lower part of the stem are covered in top dressing to give it a more naturalized look with the plant maybe not perched up too high out of the dirt. And I list my kind of regular cactus and succulent society mix here, which is 40% squeegee, which is like a fine pea gravel, the fines from pea gravel production. 40% pumice, and then 20% potting soil. And that's what I grow basically all my plants in. And then another option, on the other hand, is using pure pumice. So here we can see in this picture an unpotted Sulcorebutia. You can see the relatively small heads on top, and then you can see the deep root system below. You can see even these smaller heads on the kind of the outside edge of the clump still have a relatively thick taproot that goes down almost as deep, if not deeper, than the taproot of this main head in the center. So now we'll look at a brief comparison between the two potting regimes that I proposed. The first being the one that I use, just standard cactus and succulents soil plus top dressing. As far as pros go, it contains all the nutrients, or a large part of the nutrients needed for plant growth due to the organic matter in that small proportion of regular potting soil. It holds water more evenly. It doesn't dry out fast, but it also doesn't hold a lot of moisture because there's so much porous matter. And then it's a more natural substrate that reflects kind of more what the plants would encounter in habitat. The cons, though, is it can hold water because it does have organic material in it, and the pumice can hold water in the pores within that material as well. And then it kind of makes it hard for the offsets, I think, to root easily. One of the easiest ways to propagate Sulcorebutias is when you have a big clump, like we looked at in the previous picture. You can just pull off an offset, and oftentimes it will come out with roots already on it. After letting the wound where you pulled it off, which really isn't that big, it only needs to dry out for a couple days, if that, and then it can simply be planted like the mother plant. But when you grow them with top dressing, that top layer dries out very quickly, and it makes the offsets, in my opinion, or in my experience, less likely or more difficult for them to send down a new taproot. Now we'll look at pumice. Some of the pros is that it dries out very quickly. It basically very difficult to rot a plant in pumice by keeping it too wet, at least. And that is a key point that we'll talk about down here. And then, like I said, those offsets can root very easily. in the porous top surface layer of the pumice. Creates the perfect environment, slightly moist, high humidity with still a lot of air for the offsets to send down a new root system. The cons, on the other hand, is that pumice by itself really contains no nutrients. And because of that, it makes the need to fertilize much greater. Whereas most of, in a regular cactus and succulent society soil, most of those nutrients that the plant needs will be in that organic portion. Here we really have no nutrients whatsoever, and they all need to be provided via the fertilizer. One thing that pumice does have a lot of that air, and because it's a relatively light and not very dense material, it will warm up the roots a lot quicker. So if you leave a plant in this cactus and succulent society, or cactus and succulent soil, sorry, that contains a large mineral component like that squeegee that I use in my mix, that gives a lot of thermal inertia. So it will heat up slower during the day and it will cool faster at night. And if you look at where these plants grow, they often grow associated with large rocks. And so they get that thermal inertia, and especially at high elevations, the roots don't get super cold or super hot, sorry. Anyway, so when you plant it in something with a very low density like scoria, it's much more susceptible to those temperature fluctuations, or pumice, I suppose, scoria and pumice being synonymous. And also, when plants in scoria dry out too quickly, they might be susceptible to dry rot, which is another type of rot that happens to the plants when they go too long without water. So you can rot them really by them being too wet, but also can rot them by being too dry. And so I find that really I've used both in the past. I like to stick with this, mainly because it's a more natural substrate. I don't have to worry about fertilizing. Well, we can see a small portion of my Sulcorebutia collection in this picture. And you can see that they're basically potted. Well, I guess you can't see it because it's in the pots, but they're all planted in kind of a typical cactus and succulent society, or cactus succulent. I say cactus and succulent society too much, I think is the issue. But cactus and succulent soil, and then with a top dressing on top of that. And I choose this because, like I started to say, it's more natural for the plants. I don't have to worry about fertility quite so much. And also having the large rock component of that soil mix really gives it enough thermal inertia that things don't get super hot during the day and don't get too cold at night. Here is a picture I pulled from the web of a Sulcorebutia collection in Germany, just to show you what it looks like when these plants are potted in 100% pumice. So you can see there's all these little offshoots that really this is creating the perfect rooting environment for them. So to propagate a plant like this, you might just have to unpot it, tear off all these offsets, pot them up, and then all of a sudden you have a large stock of plants you can sell, trade, or keep. So those are kind of the two different ways in my mind for potting and growing these plants. Now we'll take a brief look at habitat soils to see if what I talked about as far as potting goes actually reflects what these plants are experiencing in the wild. But it is important to note it's not necessary nor oftentimes advised to recreate habitat conditions too closely in cultivation. There's a lot of different variables that are affecting a plant root system in a natural environment in the soil rather than in a pot. But these can give us a good guide of what soil conditions or what plant growth conditions we need to provide. Sulcorebutias in the wild grow in a low nitrogen, neutral pH soil made up of mostly coarse fragments. So I've got to thank Peter Breslin, Dr. Peter Breslin, who many of you have probably seen a presentation by, for turning me on to soilgrids.org. Here you can see it's, I've got the link right there. This is an excellent website for getting more information about soils in different parts of the world. I was very impressed with how much data they have. So here you can see we're looking at that Sulcorebutia habitat in southeastern Bolivia. You can see that triangle from Cochabamba, Sucre in the middle, and down to Tarija in the south that makes up the majority of the Sulcorebutia as a range. You can see here's our pH scale. This is pH times 10. So most of these soils are a little on the basic side, but not that basic. You can see here is more the Atacama to the southwest of Bolivia, starting to get into northern Argentina and Chile down here. And that's these very basic desert soils. We're looking at soils in here that are a little bit more towards the basic side, but not too far, very close to neutral. Next, we've got a map that shows soil organic carbon. So this can translate to the amount of organic material that might be found, leaf litter, stuff like that, that might be found in these soils. And you can see on the scale, we're looking at a lot of soils that might have a little bit, but most of which really have very little soil organic carbon. Next, we'll look at nitrogen. These are our nitrogen levels. Once again, here, Tarija up here to Cochabamba is Sulcorebutia's habitat. You can see we've got very, very low, almost no nitrogen levels in the soil. So definitely to grow plants hard, you don't need to fertilize a whole lot. And then here's just 4 quick maps to hopefully give an idea of the soil texture. The 3 main components of soil texture being sand, silt, and clay. Or no, there's also loam on the soil triangle. So this isn't quite reflective of the soil triangle if you're familiar with that, but should still give us an idea of the general particle size of the soil that these plants are growing in. Coarse fragments obviously being the coarsest particle size, followed by sand, then silt, and then finally the smallest being clay. So you can see on this scale, there's a lot of coarse fragments. I assume that refers to things like little chunks of poorly decomposed rock, any rock or inorganic material that's larger than sand. A little bit, kind of moderate amounts of sand, and then probably the least of clay, but still kind of a moderate to low amount. So most of the particles in the soil are going to be on the larger side. So using a material or mix with a lot of drainage and not going overboard on pH adjustment is probably going to give you good results with these plants. Next, we'll talk about a few resources that if this talk sparks your love for Sulcorebutia and you want to learn more, here's a couple things that a couple books that you can either check out from the library or buy that you can learn more from. The first is probably the most accessible book for English audiences or English readers is Sulcorebutia and Weingardia by John Pilbeam. This is a good book with a lot of probably more words and more descriptions of the plants. And this other book here, A Sulco Gallery, also by John Pilbeam, but this time with David Hunt, is basically what this PowerPoint is going to be, and just a bunch of pictures of blooming plants. Down here, we have maybe less accessible books. This one here, which I've already, I think, used 1 or 2 figures from, is by Carl Augustin, Willie Girdle, who's really an expert in the genus, and Günther Henschel. And it's all in German. So in order to read this book, you need to use Google Translate, which isn't that hard to do if you're really curious. And then finally here, a book by Ladislav Horacek from the Czech Republic. It's an excellent book. The first half is in Czech, but it has a limited kind of English translation of the species descriptions in the back that are very useful. So all these I would recommend. There's also a computer program You can get it from Johan Pot in the Netherlands that has a lot of good habitat data and a lot of really detailed pictures of all the different collections in cultivation. And then I just had to add this new slide in because since I last gave this talk, there's been some new publications. Also by Willie Girdle here is a Life Devoted to Sulcorebutia collection of pictures. This is actually a free ebook. So if you like this presentation in any capacity, I highly recommend that you go online and Google this book and you can download it for free. It's created, I think he's licensed it under the Creative Commons license. And it's just mainly pictures, habitat pictures, but beautiful, beautiful book. And I don't have this one yet, I need to order it, but Ladislav Horacek just updated that last book I showed in the previous slide for 2020. And so I'm very excited to eventually get this book and read it as well. So now we'll jump into the second half of the talk here. I think I'm doing good on time. And this is the portion of the talk where we will take a virtual tour through Bolivia. We'll start up north in La Paz, the capital, and then first hit some of these northern populations and then travel down this eastern eastern edge of the Andes, goes around here. We won't actually make it this far south. You can see here's Tarija is down here, but we'll end just south of Zúñez in this area here. So we'll start, like I said, in the capital, which is, I assume, where you would fly into if you wanted to visit Bolivia, and then travel down here to these northern locations in the Sulcorebutia range. First species we're going to look at is Sulcorebutia candiae. This is a nice kind of dark-bodied plant. It has a medium-sized body. They're not super big, but they're also not super tiny. Covered in these curly golden spines, and then complemented with these yellow, kind of yellowish orange flowers. The contrast between the gold spines and the dark body and these, gold flowers that match the spines makes these very pretty plants. But I'm probably going to say that about every picture. Next, we have another yellow flowered species, which is Sulcorebutia arenacea. This is very common in the trade. These plants generally are solitary, but with age can cluster. They get also these nice golden yellow flowers, but there's also white flowered clones out there that you can find. But probably the most common, I would say, species in the trade is Sulcorebutia aranacea. Next, we have another yellow flowered species, Sulcorebutia menziesii, and it has a little bit more upright spines, whereas a lot of the Sulcorebutias, you can handle them without fear of getting prickled. This is a little spikier plant that you might need to take a little bit more care of. But once again, very pretty, lighter yellow flowers. The other ones might have a little bit of a tint of orange. These are more of a lemon yellow. So we'll move from Santa Rosa down to Coriri, which is a little southwest of there. Find Sulcorebutia candiae variety Mushii. This is now listed as its own species now, but once again, like I said, I keep the names that I get the plants with. And then just a quick note about these numbers after the name. This is the collection data. So the first two refer to the collector. I'm not sure off the top of my head who GV is, the person who originally collected the seeds from the wild. And then this plant is many generations probably removed from those original wild collected seeds. Plants from those original seeds have just been crossed subsequently in order to get to the plants that they are derived from. So with this collection number, we can find out not only who collected it, but by looking this up, find when those seeds were originally collected and where those plants are originally from. So this is closely, it does resemble candiae, but this has much longer, more upright spines than the just candiae variety candiae. And like I said, now it's its own species in some, depending on whose taxonomy you follow. So now we'll move even further south to the first large city within the Sulcorebutia range, which is Cochabamba. In the area of that city, we can find Sulcorebutia krugeri, which gets very dense straw-colored spines. They make for very pretty plants because they often have a lot denser spines than Sulcorebutias usually have. These spines almost completely covering the plant body underneath. And then once again, we get beautiful kind of yellow-orange flowers that you can see here. There are a number of varieties of Sulcorebutia krugeri, or krugeri. One of the most common is Hoffmanniana, and it gets these really nice red tint or red edged petals. It's a little bit of a bicolor flower there, which is very pretty. Now we'll move even further to the southeast to Cleza. You can see Sulcorebutia veronicae there. If a Latin name ends in an AE, that is the feminine ending, so you can tell that it's named after a girl. So here that's probably not super surprising with a name like a veronicae, but you can tell if something is named after a person, it ends in an AE, it's named after a female person, and if the ending is two I's, be named after a male. But this is another species with more robust spines. This plant in my collection doesn't get quite enough light as it should to form those dense spines that it should have. But once again, beautiful yellow flowers with kind of a reddish orange outer petals. Then we have Sulcorebutia clezensis, which is named for Cleza. Whenever you see the Latin name ending ensis, it means from the preceding word. So clezensis is from Cleza. And it gets these nice, I have a little bit of the doubts on whether this is actually clezensis or not, but the flowers seem to match. And they get these nice, beautiful, light bubblegum pink flowers. Next, we have Sulcorebutia polymorpha. Polymorpha meaning many forms in Greek. These plants are supposed to be, I guess, based on that name, quite variable, but all the ones that I've seen always kind of look the same. They have a dark green body with very long black spines, black to red spines. And I guess they have a variety of flower colors. Most typical is pink like this, but you can also get ones that are kind of a yellowish orangey pink as well. Now we'll move further south here to Anzaldo, and that's where you can find Sulcorebutia terratensis. This is a very nice plant. It has a dark body, a dark purplish green body, and it's got these kind of bicolored straw spines, with the spines lighter towards the tip, and then towards the aerial, they get a little darker reddish brown. So between the kind of maroon green body and those bicolored spines, these make for very attractive plants. And oftentimes they have very small heads as well. Even smaller is, or a variety with even smaller heads is Sulcorebutia terratensis variety minima. So you can see that here, a little better idea of those bicolored spines and the dark kind of maroonish green body. And all the plants of either or both Sulcorebutia terratensis and the variety minima have these kind of flat pink flowers, or kind of a real nice dark, or darker than like a bubblegum pink, but real nice darkish pink flower. But mainly I would say grown for the cool spination and color of the plant body. Here's an even smaller form of terratensis variety minima. HS is Heinz Svoboda, just for your information. So that's who originally collected the seed that eventually produced this plant. And you can see those nice spines with that dark purple body and another kind of flat mid-pink flower. That's what I'll call it. Now we'll move south here to Toro Toro. And there we can find Sulcorebutia verticillacantha, which is a very confusing taxon. A lot of things that are a lot of different varieties. And here you can see not only do we have a variety, but a forma of that variety. So kind of whenever you see forms of Sulcorebutia verticillacantha, it's quite a confusing group within the genus. But this is variety cuprea, referring to the red color of the flowers, form brevispina, once again collected by Heinz Swoboda. And you can see that this puts on a very spectacular flowering display of dark red flowers with kind of an orangey center, almost covering the plant. It's a very, very attractive species. Now we'll kind of jump back up north here to Epizana. I don't think we're doing a good job probably of following roads. At least we've got this road here. But around Epizana, we have Sulcorebutia tiraquensis, variety Bicolor spina. Sulcorebutia tiraquensis is one of the larger varieties, more solitary in habitat, as well as when they're younger plants in cultivation. And Bicolor spina is so named because we get these dark red spines mixed with these kind of white glassine spines as well. Either way, it gets these beautiful pink flowers with more of a curved tip to the petal that give them more of a thick waxy look, which is very attractive. Now we'll move to Totora, and there we can find Sulcorebutia tiraquensis, variety Torotensis. Once again, ensis meaning where the plant, or referring to where the plant is from. So this is from Toro, like we saw on the map. This gets, once again, kind of a middle pink flower and more wiry, thinner spines that cover the plant. Move down here to Mizque. We have a quick picture here from Google Earth, or Google Maps, a street view, I guess, street view picture of what it would look like in the Sulcorebutia habitat. And you can see here we've got the Andes Mountains. This is in a little valley between two ranges of mountains within the Andes. It actually looks very similar to maybe Fairplay or one of the mountain parks in Colorado, where we've got this mountain valley. On either sides, we've got kind of these rocky slopes with a lot of dirt, but also some small shrubs, some grasses. So this is kind of where you would find these plants, is on these rocky slopes, based on finding cacti in the mountains here in Colorado. They tend to like very specific set of conditions or orientation, and all tend to be found in relatively the same place on each slope. From Mizque is Sulcorebutia mizquensis. This is LH, refers to Ladislav Horacek. And mizquensis is one of my favorite species because it gets very dense spine covering, and the spines are all highly reflexed down to the ground here. And when the plants get older, they can basically cover the whole plant body so that you can't see any of the green underneath. And with these highly reflexed downward pointing spines, it's a very cool looking plant. It almost looks like one of the very desirable mammillarias, like Mammillaria Sanchez Meharade, or a plant like that with these kind of strongly reflexed spines, or maybe even a turbinocarpus. Here's another one, a larger species, Sulcorebutia mentosa. These are less likely to clump, although they can clump with age in cultivation. It's a larger plant, like I said, and they get these dark red spines, kind of reddish black spines that are very attractive. There's also a variety flavissima that gets yellow spines, which I have some seeds for, but I haven't grown that variety yet. Once again, with kind of a middle pink sort of flower. Then we have Sulcorebutia albissima, meaning the most white in Latin is what albissima means. And it's named because these spines are very light in color and can cover the plant to make them look very light colored if you look at them quickly. Once again, with a pink flower with kind of skinnier petals than a lot of the other ones that we've looked at. And these are large flowers too, quite a bit larger than some of the other species. Now we'll move down here to Omerique, where you can find Sulcorebutia augustinii, named after, blanking on his first name, but the Augustine who wrote that first book, or one of those books that I mentioned. And they are often very small headed plants. So you can see this is a 2-inch pot, so that's probably about maybe 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch in diameter, with very dense spines. And very thick spines too, a lot thicker than a lot of the other species of Sulcorebutia. Once again, with a very pretty pink flowering display, with some petals a little wider petals with more of a blunt point, with I guess a little tip in the center of that more rounded blunt point. Now we'll move down here. We're switching to the next southernmost range of cities. Start here to the east, or the west, sorry, Oropesa. Find Sulcorebutia caniguralii. Like I mentioned in the beginning of the talk, this is one of the kind of lump all taxa within Sulcorebutia. A lot of the other ones that we'll look at in the later half of the talk here will, or can be now, lumped into Rebutia caniguralii. But this is Sulcorebutia caniguralii sensu strictu, I suppose. They get a large range of flower colors. Like I said, this is kind of why I theorize that there's a hybrid, some interspecific hybridization going on, creating hybrid swarms, because we'll see pink flowered forms like this, but we'll also see some other colors as well. This is a very nice one, very attractive plant body with the lighter colored spines on the darker skinned plants below, with this kind of flat, kind of middle pink, maybe a little darker. Move to Quiquihama here, where we get plants in the Callichroma group. Once again, like I said, this is a name that I bought the plant with, or got the plant, the name that was attached to the plant when I got it. I think a lot of these have now been combined into Sulcorebutia pulchra. But this is Callichroma. It gets a startlingly dark red flower. In addition to that dark, really dark, the picture really doesn't do justice to just how dark of red or deep of red some of these flowers are. If we look at the plant, it's very cool as well. It's sparsely spined with large kind of bulbous tubercles. This is one of my favorite forms. Another form of Callichroma, I love these bicolored white and pink flowers. Once again, we have a cool kind of olive drab green plant with sparse spines. I think it's a very cool look. It's almost, and these are big plants too. If you're familiar with Sulcorebutia rauschii, which we're going to look at later because it's from a little bit further south, it looks like a Sulcorebutia rauschii on steroids, which is quite cool. But notice that we just had a form with a dark red flower, and now we have one with kind of a pink and white flower. It's quite a big difference between two species within the same, or two forms within the same species. Next, we'll look at another form. This gets kind of a more of a rainbow flower, starting out with a hot pink to kind of a salmony red to an orange to a yellow. The plant's not quite as cool. It has a little denser spines to it, dense straw-colored spines, but that flower it's one of my favorite flowers because it gets that rainbow look. Now we'll look at Sulcorebutia Callichroma variety Longispina. And this is if you're familiar with the Sulcorebutia pulchra that is commonly available just without any collection data that you can get. That's kind of synonymous, I would say, with this plant. I have one I got just at a local garden center here, a Sulcorebutia pulchra. And the plant basically looks the same, and it's got the same kind of mid-pink flower. Now we'll move to, there's two cities here that are close to each other in this area. And this pin is halfway between them. And it's the northernmost city, I think, is Presto, and the southernmost one is Pasopea. And that's where we find Sulcorebutia pasopeana, named for that city. This is a cool group of plants with very, very deep red flowers. The main variation we'll see here is in petal shape. Here's a form with very narrow petals with rounded tips. Here's one with a little wider petals with kind of more of an orangey yellow center. Very pretty to have that bicolored flower. Another form with an even darker red flower. Like I said, the photos just can't pick up how deep, almost a black red, these flowers are. It's a very intense color. And these plants are attractive too, oftentimes with a little darker purple-green skin with longer, shaggier, bicolored spines. It's one of my favorite Sulcorebutias, but like I said, I've probably been saying that for just about all of them. But I have a lot of forms of it. Here's probably my favorite form. It gets a lot of very short petals. It almost looks like an aster, some sort of daisy. I think it's a very attractive plant and flower. Here's another one. Unfortunately, I had some slug problems in my greenhouse. I guess I haven't talked about pests for these plants yet. I guess addition to mealybugs, which I've fought, everybody's fought them for a long time. But just for the first time this summer, I've had slugs. Being in Colorado, it's very dry. We oftentimes we're less than 30% humidity. It's very unusual to have slugs. So I've never dealt with them before, but they kind of went through the greenhouse and they just like the center of these Sulcorebutia flowers. So it's kind of weird. So you can see that damage here, but another form with a nice dark red flower. Here's another one with kind of a middle red. You can see that plant, nice bicolored spines with kind of a darker green body. And then this is a very unusual form. Instead of a red, it has a purple. A kind of a real dark purple flower. When this bloomed for the first time, I had no idea. I just assumed it would be another red one, but it turned out to be this really neat dark purple. So I'm a big fan of this collection. Then we move on to Sulcorebutia elenche. It's closely related to Sulcorebutia pulchra, and I think is now a subspecies of it. But it also gets a nice red flower. The plants are very variable. Here's one with lighter spines. And then here's one with longer white spines. And then here's one with a little bit shorter spines, shorter, denser spines. You can see there's some variation. This is a lot darker flower with kind of an orangey center as well. Here's another form of Sulcorebutia pulchra, probably the best known form. It's the most common form with data in the trade is HS70. They get these nice, real thick, blackish spines. It's a very attractive plant with kind of this medium to dark pink flower. Here's another form of pulchra, and it's got a really kind of different flower from all the others. It's got a red flower, a real light red with very skinny petals. It's a lot different. And these are kind of synonymous with those calichromas as well. And here's another form of pulchra calichroma that gets a darker red flower. This is also a very attractive plant. Darker red flower with kind of wider petals. But you can see just the amount of variation that is within plants that are labeled as the same names, supposedly in the same taxa. Here's an even more, I guess, startling example of diversity. These are both Sulcorebutia gemmae with the collection G254. And you can see that they have totally different flower colors. And these are from the same seed batch, having the same collection number. So this just shows you the amount of diversity that these plants can have, even in seeds from the same seed pod. I really wanted to cross these two to see how the offspring would look, whether they have a mix or have all pink or all yellow or some mix of the two. But unfortunately, they haven't bloomed at the same time. I think the pink one always blooms first. So now we'll jump up here to Val Grande. There we can find a very nice plant with very small heads. Probably the Sulcorebutia with the smallest heads out of any of them is Sulcorebutia langeri. And it also has a beautiful lemon yellow color. A lot of the yellow flowered ones from further north have a large body with the yellow. This, like I said, is one of the smallest, and it still gets this nice yellow flower. Then moving down here to the places where we have the highest concentration. Start with Sucre, that's sitting in the middle of the range. We have Sulcorebutia patriciae, which is one of these hairy spine Sulcorebutias, once again with beautiful pink flowers. But this one can be identified because these spines can take on a little bit of a goldish tint, a little bit of a brown gold tint, and be a lot longer than some of the others. Then we have the Alba reolata groups. This is a species that is closely allied. You can probably tell from the plant body, closely allied to the Pulchra calichroma ones that we've looked at. This has a beautiful white and pink flower. We get this form with kind of a bubblegum pink, light pink. It's very attractive. And this form, once again, totally different flower. These really sharp, skinny red petals with a yellow gold center. Then we have Sulcorebutia frankiana, another one you can find at some of the, I've seen, I got this one once again at one of the local garden centers here. But very spectacular flower. If this was blooming in the garden center, I doubt I would have been the one to get it. And it's closely related as well to those albarreolata ones. And it can, just one more note, these can get larger and be more solitary than some of the other Sulcorebutias. Then we'll move down to Terabuco, where we have Sulcorebutia terabucoensis. If you get the just the straight Terabucoensis, once again named because it's from Terabuco, you get these kind of darkish red, kind of medium dark red flowers with usually a lighter center. You can see the center of this is more orangey, but you get these sparse upward pointing spines on very knobby accentuated tubercles. Make for quite pretty plants. Here's another one with, I just described how they typically look, and this one, of course, the next slide doesn't quite fit that description. We don't get those sparse upward pointing spines, but we get this beautiful flower. This is, once again, I love these Sulcorebutias that get the, they can have multiple colors per flower. They are smaller, I guess, if you want to compare this to like a Trichoceros or Echinopsis hybrid. They are smaller, but this is how they look in nature. So it's like, you know, like they've been hybridized by nature versus humans. Here's Terabucoensis variety aurifolia, named because of for a yellow flower. We get these two forms for the same G049. Quite different. You know, this one's more rounded. These are a little bigger, sharper petals, but both very pretty. Then we'll move to Zoudiniez next. This is kind of the view. Looks kind of very similar to the other view, showing how similar a lot of these habitats are. Once again, get these little mountain valleys. This is the town of Zoudiniez there. Here we can find Sulcorebutia rauschii, probably the best known, one of the best known. And all these Terabucoensis rauschii are all now, if you follow the New Cactus lexicon, are now all Rebutia caniguralii. So these are some examples of the ones that have been lumped into that caniguralii group. But here's a kind of a standard form, beautiful tight pectinate black spines with a purplish green body with a dark pink flower, very typical of Sulcorebutia rauschii. It's a good point to stop and reintroduce the term interspecific variation. You can see all these are Sulcorebutia rauschii. Just an incredible amount of diversity within this taxon. We have everything from these large white or longer white spines to these real tight pectinate thick black spines, and the body color as well. Here's even kind of more of a reddish brown spine. But just amazing. That's part of the reason why they're my favorite, is because each plant is going to be something different or has the potential to. Here's another form of Sulcorebutia rauschii with a lot more petals, a lot thicker, a lot denser flower, very pretty. Another form, very similar, a little smaller tubercles. Another one, this is a grafted plant, so that's why it's got so many flowers on it, but just beautiful displays that you can get. And then here are two forms with lighter spines. This has a little longer, lighter spine, and this has a shorter, lighter spine. But just this doesn't really even look like the same plant. And also it's very nice. This one has a whitish center to the flower, whereas most of them will just have this flat pink flower. Then caniguralii variety aurifolia. This is one of my favorites. Unfortunately, I lost this plant over the winter, so I'll have to track it back down. But just beautiful, beautiful yellow to orange variation there. Another pink flowered caniguralii. This one almost has like a strawberry sort of kind of a reddish pink or orangey pink that I find very attractive. Another form of Caniguralii, this one with a yellow flower, yellow and orange to red flower versus those forms that we looked at that were pink. This is a different form of Terabucoensis, Calliensis, which, as you might imagine, is from Calli. This is a great form with very narrow stems. I originally thought I wasn't giving it enough light, and so I put it up in I moved it to an area that I thought had better light, and it looked exactly the same. So this form just gets these very, very long, skinny heads, which is kind of cool, and a beautiful yellow flower. Another form of Calliensis, this with a more typical Terabucoensis sort of flower with red to yellow coloration. Yet another form. This one is another form with kind of skinnier petals. But once again, that same red on the outside to yellow towards the inside. And then this is a very popular form, Sulcorebutia Terabucoensis, I read the name, but this is VZ 056B, clone 13. And the variation of color within this flower is amazing, especially for a plant that, looks like this potentially in nature, not particularly, just no humans have bred or selected this for this sort of coloration. I mean, you could always say that they could have over the generations that the seed has been in cultivation, but this has the potential to exist in the wild completely. Another hairy variety, Sulcorebutia hirtusii, this time with a darker purple stem and a real white. I mentioned with the patriciae, it often gets a yellowish or gold tint to the spines. These spines are pure white. It's again with a white center of the flower, makes it very attractive. Sulcorebutia hirtusii, a little different hairy species with more prominent tubercles. A lot of these have been combined, these hairy ones as well have been combined into Caniguralii as well. And then finally we have Crispata. This is a moderately common one you can find. And it gets these long kind of curly white spines. Crispata means curly in Latin. So they've got these curly white spines with pink flowers. A couple different forms. Ignore the ugly mealybug infested plant that is flowering here. It's doing much better now. And then this form here is probably my favorite with these very densely petaled light bubblegum pink flowers. Little, not as typical. The spines aren't really curly at all, but still labeled as Crispata. Two more here. We go to El Palmar, which is kind of down off the map in this corner. Find Sulcorebutia caracensis. Kind of unusual to have this flat, like tangerine colored flower. Not a lot of Sulcorebutias just have a flat orange flower like that. And then finally down here to the south of Zudinez, almost straight south to San Jacinto, you can find another form of Terabucoensis. Two different clones here. One clone with just a yellow to orange to red, and then this clone here, which is my preference between the two. We get yellow to orange to a hot pink to a red. It's, once again, a very pretty plant. So that's the end of my talk. Thank you everybody for listening. Hopefully sparked more interest in the genus Sulcorebutia and might have learned something more about them as well.
Right, but if you ever mix them together.
Yeah, it's mixed.
Thank you, Jackson. Sorry, I was muted.
No worries.
Wonderful presentation. I'm always very frustrated by the taxonomy, but I have a question about it. When you are judging or entering plants oh, sorry. My husband just told me I needed to sit. There we go. When you're entering plants in a show, are you using, I noticed that there is a separate, lately the separate category for Rebutia and Sulcorebutia. Is that still the case?
I redid our show schedule when you're the one redoing the show schedule, you can maximize it for your favorite plants.
I see.
So in our show, Sulcorebutia, Weingardia, and Cynthia make up one category, and then Rebutia makes up a separate category as well.
So something like Rauschii would be in the Rebutia category?
They should all be Weingardia. Every plant that you saw in that presentation, if you go by the most current taxonomy, should be a Weingardia.
Uh-huh. And when you enter it, should you label it Weingardia? Technically speaking?
It gets into a lot of confusion and kind of my
Or
philosophy
both?
is as long as it's an accurate or a validly published name, it's okay. So both for Sulcorebutia rauschii, you could label it as Sulcorebutia Rebutia caniguralia. You could not label it as Sulcorebutia caniguralia because I don't know that that's, or Weingardia
Right.
caniguralia, because those might not be publicly named, or sorry, those might not be officially published names. But you could call it, so you could call it Rebutia caniguralia, you could call it Sulcorebutia rauschii, or you could call it Weingardia, and I forget what they have, but I forget if it's Weingardia rauschii or Weingardia caniguralia.
Is Lodi a good
Yeah.
resource for that? Okay.
Yeah, whatever is in his book is, I would say, that's a taxonomy I go by officially, and any name in his book is probably good.
Okay.
Although they just, there's just a paper that came out that combined all of Escobari and Depili Cyphora. And I read that paper and looked at their reasoning, and it's very good. So that would be something that came out after Joel O'Day's book, but with exceptions like that. For the most part, his book is excellent. For when it was written, I would say, when it was written, it was the most accurate book to date.
Jackson, I labeled mine as according to Joel O'Day in terms of family species, but if it's got an old, I hate to say older name, but and I don't want to say common name, but it's an older variant. Then I'll call it, the family name, species name that's in low day, variety, whatever the other name is, that maybe that I bought it under. That way there's a link to what the older name is or the other name, and it also validates what the new low day Cactaceae is.
Yeah, I think that's a real good way to label a collection, where the only place I would see as far as a show goes you'd get into trouble is, well, that I think would certainly help you keep track of plants, and maybe familiar people. It's never been a validly published, or it might be, but chances are it might not be a validly published name that would not be recognized scientifically. Whether that matters to a show is, when you get into those varieties, a lot of times, things get a little more, a little more fluid with varieties. But yeah, I think that's a great way to do it.
Do you have Sulcorebutia swobodia?
I do.
Ah, okay.
It bloomed. I don't know. There was a couple. I was going through the talk. I updated the talk with stuff that had bloomed since the last time I gave it, and there were a couple like Sulcorebutia swobodia and one or two other species. I said, wait, what happened to that picture? I thought I had a picture of that.
You need to go on Guillermo's tour of Bolivia.
Yeah, that'd be fun. I would definitely like to go, both there and Patagonia. My two favorite cactus locations is southern Bolivia there, and then of course Patagonia as well. Stuff like Pterocactus and Moeniopsis and stuff. I'd like to go to both those places.
Any other questions? That was very complete, so thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. Thank you
And,
so much for the invitation.
Yeah, it was really a pleasure. Always very, very good to hear your talks. You're a really good speaker.
You're a good teacher.
And a good teacher, yes.
Thanks.
So we'll move on. Feel free to hang around or or take off as your schedule requires.
Cool.
Oh,
Probably go
Thank
on.
you, Jackson.
Yeah, thank
thanks,
you, everybody.
Jackson. You take care.
Yep, you too.
Okay, thanks. Bye. So we will move on with our plan of the month. And I will see if I can share my screen. Do you see that or not?
Yes.
Great. So here are our February plants from, and there were a lot of bragg plants, which were great. Aloe Hemingi from Laurel Woodley, and Crassula orbicularis variety Rosellaris from Laurel. Here's the Curio flower, which I thought was beautiful, and a beautiful Lachenalia bulbifera. Another Lachenalia trichophylla. Marlothistella stenophila. And here's a typical Matricana flower, that long tubular structure. I wanted to go back because I thought this was a great shot of typical Matricana flowers. Same with the color from Laurel. Pelargonium cotyledonus, yeah. And a beautiful Ripsalis tucumenensis from, let's go back to that, from Deborah Galliani. Here she's showing the structure of the plant, close up, and then another close up of the flower. And this garden of Tillandsia usnioides from Mike Short.
Now, is that the same as Spanish moss?
Yeah.
It looks like it,
It's
yes.
a common name.
What'd you say, Mike?
Yeah, some call it Spanish moss. It's got all sorts of moss names, but yeah, that's the one from the southeast.
Thank you.
Is this growing in your garden?
Yeah, it's a few yards from where I
Amazing.
am now. Yeah, because that's on the northeast side of that of those trees, so
Mhm.
doesn't get any sun.
Spectacular. Thank you all for sharing. And now we'll go on to the plant of the month, to Novice cactus, which is our stenocactus. This is a multicostatus by Terry. Really nicely grown. This is in the ground, another multicostatus. And Ochoterrananus, yeah. And Stenocactus multicostatus, beautifully staged by Gretchen Davis. Really gorgeous. And Palmillus by Gretchen.
Ooh,
Novice succulents, Euphorbia from Madagascar. This Terracali in the ground by Terry. And a Terracali, no, this isn't Terracali, sorry, I take it back. This is a Millii that's variegated. I accidentally put the wrong thing, by Terry Straub. Really pretty plant. And Genodiana from Gretchen. And this is a Dicaria spirostica. And a Euphorbia cylindrifolia by Gretchen Davis. Great photos. Intermediate cactus, starting with Stenocactus crispatus by Anita Kaplan, and a crispatus by Bernard Johnson. Intermediate succulents, Euphorbia from Madagascar, Heditoides by Anita Kaplan, and Millii by Mike Short, behind bars. And this beautiful Croissatii, I don't know if that's the right way to pronounce it. Croissatii.
that's beautiful.
Isn't that gorgeous? Just so well staged with the big rock and very balanced and just
And the
beautiful
little
pot.
flowers.
And it's just, yeah, and the flowers, it's just gorgeous
I
specimen.
got that plant from Jim Gardner.
And you can see all the inset he gave us. Can you see my pointer here?
Yes.
Okay, that's those little flowers. It's just beautiful. Thank you, Mike. Open cactus, stenocactus, multicostatus with a flower catch here. Beautiful.
Wow.
Lloydii, showing all the little wavies. This is Ochoterranus. And I'm going to stop here because there's a few of these stenocactus Ochoterranus or terrananus, I don't know how you pronounce it properly, but that are from the Huntington, the ISI 2006 and 7. And Laurel has some and I have some, and you'll see how different they've all come to look. But my my tag has the same information as this. So we'll go on. This is mine, and this is the mature plant. This is just the top of it. And this is another by Laurel with the flowers. And I thought it was cute that Phyllis had a stenocactus. Wait, let's go. Philocanthus. And oh, by the way, these are pots that she painted herself, which is kind of cute.
Hmm.
This was her COVID. Look at the little mountains and cacti. Let's go back again because that was in the plants. So this is how she kept busy during COVID.
Clever.
Yeah. Open succulents, Euphorbia from Madagascar. Alawadia subspecies Anoclada by Laurel. Look at the cute little flowers. Dicarii variety Spirostica by Phyllis. Euphorbia enterophora by Laurel. Françoisie variety Crassicalis. These are my favorite. Geraldii by Laurel. And Euphorbia millii by Phyllis. Another millii. And of course, so many different hybrids creating different colors. A Thai hybrid by Laurel. A variety Bevelaniensis by Laurel. Little waxy flowers. This is Lemon Drop by Phyllis. This is Neo Humbertii by Laurel. Another one closer up showing the flowers. I love this Primulafolia by Laurel. That is just gorgeous. Stenoclada by Laurel with little seed. And a millii hybrid. And that is the end. Thank you all very much
Lovely.
for your contributions. So now we go into the announcements. We are planning March meeting to be our first in-person meeting at the Peninsula Library Community Room. And although the address is on Silver Spur Road, the community room is on the top floor, kind of, and the access to that is in the rear of the library, and the entrance is on Deep Valley Drive, which is, you can get there from Silver Spur Road. The road kind of curves around the back, and you'll see the entrance on the back side. So there's upstairs parking that's right by the entrance. And if you have plants, you can unload there. If you want to then park lower down in covered parking, you can take a elevator into the library.
Maria,
Yes, Sally?
there's two places to park. You can park on the roof of the library. That's not exactly the place you want to be. It's the big parking lot there in that little center. It's on Deep Valley. You can see it. It's the
Right,
top.
that's what I'm
But there's
saying.
also another entrance to park above on the roof of the library, down
Yes,
in the library building. What we want to do is to park in that, yes.
so this
Yes.
is Deep Valley Drive here, where that arrow's going back and forth. And see where the three big trees are? Point to that. Yeah, that's the entrance to where the community room is. And where Mike has his arrow is where you want to park.
Yeah.
That's the easiest because you can access it through this walkway and but if you don't want to park in the sun, you can unload it into the, oh, don't go too far out. Oh, are you showing where they can drive? There you go. So
No, you
this
don't want to
is,
go that way.
this is the entrance to the library parking up to the roof. You don't want to go there because you won't be able to unload. I mean, you can go there if you want to walk down, but this is the loading area. That's the best spot. Okay.
How do you do that, Mike?
I know it looks kind of confusing. Thanks, Mike. That's really
Yeah,
helpful.
magic. Yeah. Google
you're
Google
really-
Street View.
Yes, so just pay attention to that. If you go in on Silver Spur where the library is and go up that ramp, you're not going to get to the parking that's right outside the entrance to where the community room is. And that's the better place to go.
Mike, Maria, would it be helpful to have a map or the instructions that you just gave in the newsletter?
I will do that. I'll give that to Cliff. When I write my president's message, it'll be there. Okay.
Yeah, and I can send an email with
Yeah.
the map in
Right.
it. Stuff like
Okay,
that.
great. We will be, just a reminder that we can't sell plants, so there won't be any plants sold. However, there will be a lot of giveaway plants. We'll have a plant of the year to give out to everyone who comes, and also award plants to those people who have submitted photos in 2021. And, you know, birthday of the month plants, so it'll be fun. And then MA, would you like to announce the speaker?
We'll have a speaker that has been with us often in the past. Woody Minnick has so much knowledge and has traveled so many places. And I always enjoy his presentations. He's funny, he can't tell time, but his presentations are always full of really interesting information. There'll be more about it in the newsletter.
He's talking on the cacti of New Mexico, which is his home state now. So I thought that would be kind of an interesting, rather than going far afield, we can see what's in 2 states down from us. And I think it's a more accessible place for us as well. Now, the board had talked about having requirements for the meeting be vaccinated individuals only. Is there anyone who has a serious objection to that?
My only question is those who have health situations where they cannot get vaccinated, if we're wearing masks and they are willing to run the risk, can they come?
Well, I think we need to have a, consistent policy of either vaccinated, if you
Well, what
look
about a
at
positive COVID test?
a negative COVID
Negative.
test. If someone wants to get a negative COVID test within 24 hours of coming to the meeting, I think that will be acceptable. If that's okay with everyone, and please speak up if you object or disagree.
Let's just hope everybody's vaccinated.
Yes, Deborah?
If you're talking only about people who have a medical condition in which they are not allowed, it's not appropriate for them to get vaccinated, and they take a test, I'm comfortable with that, but not comfortable with anybody, that in lieu of being fully vaccinated.
Yes, I agree.
Okay, alrighty. Thanks.
So
Just wanted to
I have
clarify.
a question.
Yes.
How are we going to police this?
Well, everyone has to bring their proof of vaccination and or a negative COVID test on
How do we-
admission.
How do we verify negative COVID tests? They have to be done somewhere other than at home, right?
Right. Yes.
You want to put that in the newsletter?
Oh, I will. Oh, yeah,
also-
for sure. Yes.
My,
And from what I, pardon
Hold
me.
on a
just
minute.
one more comment.
Yes.
Are any thoughts about whether it would be good to have a sign out front that said only blah, blah, blah can enter?
Yes. The meetings need to be open to the public, but our requirement of wanting vaccinated individuals only is fine. So because we are getting the library as a 501c3, it needs to be open to the public, but having that requirement to enter is fine. So we can have a sign, open to public to vaccinated individuals only.
Maria,
Yes,
Jim Gardner,
yes.
who then is going to be checking all of these?
I thought you as a physician, you could help us do that because I'm going to be busy, working
I knew there was a
inside.
risk to asking that question.
Would you mind?
Sure, I can do it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Maria?
Hang on, because I'm going to be busy, setting things up inside, and it'd be great if you would do that. Yes, Gary?
When I went to Argentina last year, I had a lot of old lanyards, for conferences and things. I took my COVID shot record and stuck it in there and wore it through the airport on the lanyard, and it was, where everybody could see it very easily. So if anybody has those, or if Sally has some extra, the little plastic envelopes with the clips on them that people could use, they could.
We don't need to carry it around in the room. I just would.
But I mean, it makes it
We
easy.
will have it set up so, you're responsible for bringing your proof, showing it before you enter.
Okay.
That's how it's going to be. There's an area where there can be a table set up for anyone coming in. And Sally will be busy with membership, and I didn't want her to be the one having to do that check-in. She'll be checking in members, and Shane Bernard will be, getting dues from people who haven't paid up yet. But that's kind of how I envisioned it. Yes, Sally?
So are we envisioning putting a table outside the entrance there?
Right.
And then as they come through, they can do their membership?
Right.
Or two
Yeah.
tables, one is the vaccination.
Yeah,
table.
there'll be a table for vaccination, and then
Table for
they'll go at
membership.
table for membership
Okay.
as you come in. Yes, Laurel?
What's the library's policy for COVID?
Right now, it's for masks only.
Okay,
But the county, you know, the county dictates that, and the county may change their mask mandates. So
Mhm.
that's why I want to keep the vaccination policy to
Mhm.
you know, keep all of us safe. Mike, you have a question?
Yeah, so the people manning the tables, the membership and the vaccination police, are they going to miss the presentation, or are they're going to be?
No, my plan is to start the presentation a little later, so that if you'll let Woody know that we'll probably start around 1:45, maybe 2, because we cannot get into the library till 1 o'clock. So we're really going to be setting up a fairly long time before presentation. So I thought the presentation should be around 2, and that'll give us time to come in and get settled.
Are we bringing plants?
Yes, plant of the month will be, where are we? Thelocactus and Aeonium and Granovia.
Mm.
And Woody will judge, and you know Woody's a pretty stiff judge, so make them look good. And of course, any brag plants and any plants you have questions about are also welcome. And if you've got something that you've had a question about for a long time, Woody is a very good resource, so bring it in. So we'll have brag plants, question plants, plant of the year. Laurel is growing her Phocia edulis, which will be the plant of the year for 2022. And giveaway plants as well as award plants. So there's a lot of setup for all of that. Yes, MA.
I had 2 questions. Plant of the month, I mean, birthday plants. Are we starting fresh with March,
Yes,
skipping the last 2 years?
yes.
And I don't recall if you said there would be no food and don't bring any.
Oh, thank you. Yes, there will be no food or drink.
Thank
You can bring your own water if you want, but we won't be serving anything, right?
Right. And we ask if you have any food or drink that you want to partake, that you go outside to drink it. Because if we're going to be masked, I don't want, you know, people taking off masks. And again, we're going to have to see what the county is recommending.
So if we bring our own water, we go outside to drink it? Is that what you said?
Ideally, yeah.
Okay,
If we have a mask mandate.
okay.
Any other questions? It's going to be a little strange, and yes, Anita.
At the show and sale, will we be bringing lunch for the workers?
I'll talk about the show and sale later, because this is,
Okay.
yeah, it's a whole separate thing. Thanks
Okay.
for bringing that up, though. Okay, no other questions about the meeting? We will move on. Last month's minutes were posted on the website. If there are no corrections, we will accept the minutes as published. Any corrections? Okay, thank you to Deborah, who is our recently appointed secretary, for taking minutes. I appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Any other announcements before we stop recording? Okay, please stop recording.